Thank you for tuning in to the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like the material. Tonight we have an exciting program ahead. We have Kathy Jefford, the author of the book Where's Jimmy? And tonight she's going to tell us about her history as a Jehovah's Witness. We're living in some exciting times. There's a lot of news that's happening, especially with the Jehovah Witnesses. Many of the headquarters staff are scrambling because Bethelites are speaking out and all sorts of things are happening. Kathy, could you please just give us a little idea of where you're from?
Well, I'm from Ohio, kind of central Ohio, very near the Appalachian region. Uh, Proudly say I have a lot of hillbilly relatives. Um,
Okay, very good. Now, what's exciting about tonight, you're one of the few people that I've actually spoken to that has been willing to talk about 1975. Nowadays on social media, a lot of Jehovah Witnesses are saying that 1975 was not a prediction of the end of the world. So it's nice to have someone that actually lived through that time and that era. So we look forward to hearing from you tonight as you explain your background and growing up in Ohio. But before we get started, I wanted to show this video.
mhm.
It's a video of the convention at the Yankee Stadium back in 1963. And all of these people that lived during this time were looking forward to the end of the world in 1975. Let's have at it.
New York's Yankee Stadium becomes the home of some 67,000 Jehovah's Witnesses, opening an 8-day international convention here. Delegates come from the eastern part of the United States, Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean. It is very much of a family gathering. A parking field near the stadium is converted into a cafeteria to feed the multitudes. 100 volunteer cooks, all of them members of the sect, prepare the meals. This meeting is one of 24 conventions the witnesses will hold in various parts of the world this year. Plants and evergreens line the base paths. A fountain occupies the pitcher's mound. The theme of the meeting is everlasting good news, and the sermon delivered from the speaker's dais at second base is on the subject of the world as the field of God's work. There are over 1 million witnesses in that field.
Wow. So there were a
Well,
million people that attended that convention. And it's sad to say that most of those people have passed on and did not see the end of the world. So let's focus on you. Let's talk about your life. How did
sure.
your family um, learn about Jehovah's Witnesses?
That's a question I never did get a full answer on. Um, but my father was at that convention in 1963, and I
Wow.
was 10 years old then. And my father hung on every word. He was what I would call an extreme witness. Yeah, I was born in 1953, and 5 years later is when the Orange Paradise book came out.
Oh, wow.
And, we didn't get presents back then for anything. So, birthdays, holidays, none of that. So I got to have my own copy of the Paradise book. And actually, I have an older and younger sister and two younger brothers. And while I couldn't really read at the age of 5 much, those stories were read to me so often that I could tell the story. And the very last chapter, it does talk about the end of the world. I mean, it talks about Armageddon. And the magazines back in that time had those frightening images on the cover that showed people running and afraid. And behind them, there's buildings, government buildings, churches that are all falling in the background. And, my father's reassuring, but we're the chosen ones. So don't worry about it. Just that's okay. Don't worry about it. It was really when I started school and I came home. Well, let me back up just a shade, Mel. Um,
Take your time.
Back then, there was a group of witnesses in our community, probably most of the congregation, that either had mobile homes or built small homes on a hill outside of town. So growing up from about the age of 3 or 4 until I was about 7 or 8, every person in that community was a witness. Everything we did was watched. And that was pretty annoying, if you will, uh, because I think witnesses like to snitch on each other for the most trivial things. But just to give some background, I was very sheltered. About the only people outside of the Kingdom Hall was my mom's relatives, which thankfully none of them were witnesses. So visiting them and was a treat, and they're still very precious to me. But then I started school, and you run home, you're excited, and telling my dad, "Hey, my teacher's great, the students are great, and I'm loving it." And he brings me down 100 degrees and just says, "Well, they're not witnesses, and they're not going to survive unless you preach to them." It's a pretty heavy burden to throw on a child, and that was the pressure constantly. Someone commented in my book that one of the things that most touched them is saying my childhood was stolen. I mean, it was. Uh, my whole childhood, and 1975, I started that year at the age of 21. So not just childhood, but my young adulthood, everything was about Armageddon. The end was coming. And that's a really frightening thing for a child. Um, when, well, I'll jump back to Jimmy. All my life, I felt that I had to write a story about Jimmy. And now I can still cry. Um,
It's okay.
it, it was such a turning point for me. And I was 8, 9, 10 years old. Um, so again, we were poor, and there's not that many members in our congregation, but there was a couple that had little boy Jimmy, and because I had other siblings and he was an only child, his mom was a nurse, and she would pick me up and take me to their house to play with him. So that was kind of a big sister, and he was my little brother. And so I was very close, and loved his parents. They were very, very kind. When he was about 2 years old, he got leukemia. And, back at that time, there was no cure for leukemia. I can't speak to, I don't believe he ever had a blood transfusion, which I believe was one of the treatments at the time. I don't believe he did. But it wasn't until actually the year after he died that they were able to save a couple of boys with leukemia. So, um, watching him get ill and was hard, but I always loved him, and we played together often. We'd sit together in the Kingdom Hall, and even though we weren't supposed to have any snacks, um, his mom always carried those little red boxes of raisins,
Oh,
and even though I didn't really like them, I ate them with them, whether we were at the hall or in service or at their house. So, uh, you know, it, I don't. I think a lot of people can understand that you develop a relationship with that's very special, and and then he died. A few weeks before he died, I didn't get a visit him. He died at home, and I vividly remember. I'm 8 years old. I vividly remember his funeral. Um, And I remember how judgmental and mean a lot of the women were. And I say that because as my family walked by, my father first carrying his uh, son, and then my mom carrying my sister, and then my other sister. I was the last in line, and Jimmy's mom stopped me at the end of the casket, and um, she raised the blanket over his feet. It was over his feet, and she let me peek in there. Now, his mom had gotten he and I these little, really small, maybe 9 or 10 inches, our own little black and white teddy bears. And of
oh,
course, like I said, gifts were pretty rare back then. And we had a few Matchbox cars and a few little plastic toys. We had cowboys and Indians back then, and that's what we played with. Um, so you put some of those in the casket. Mel, that was 60 years ago.
Oh
And
wow.
she had to real quick bring the blanket down and hide it. And she said, Kathy, it's our secret. And I said, okay. Because these women would have, they would have just thought that was um, uncalled for. Women that I really didn't like at the Kingdom Hall. One used to pinch my cheeks till I cried. And when I told my parents, they're like, oh, it's like they don't believe me. So, when I went to the hall, I had to figure out how to, try to stay away from her. I remember her name, and I'm not good at names. But yeah, so Jimmy's death was really tough. But hey, paradise is coming. I got my own paradise book. Shows me how wonderful it's going to be. Everybody's going to be healthy. He would be cured. We would have all the animals, everything. And this was real. For me, this was as real as anything. Um, I would say he died in the summer, and I can't remember exact time frames, but it wasn't long before they divorced. Well, it was not long before they stopped coming to meetings, preaching, and they ended up divorced. And they each remarried. Um, his mom became
Jimmy's
Jewish.
parents. Okay.
Jimmy's parents, I'm sorry, yes, they remarried. And so they'd stopped being witnesses. His mom married a Jewish man, and she became Jewish. And Jimmy's dad married a woman who was, I don't know, Methodist or Presbyterian something. So they were attending other churches. So needless to say, they're gone. And when things happened that someone was disfellowshipped, my father would say, you never speak to them again, and you never say their name. We don't talk about it. And these, particularly some of these old ladies at the Kingdom Hall, would say, when after that happened, well, then Jimmy's gone. He has no hope. Um, he was 4 years old. He was never baptized. He never dedicated his life to Jehovah. His parents are gone. He's not going to get into paradise. And so I've maybe by then, maybe I'm 9 years old. Um, Nine, I don't think I was even 10, but I never forgot that. And I begged my dad, come on, Dad, I'm going to play with Jimmy in paradise. He'll be resurrected. Um, and he said, no. I mean, here's this little child. You think about one of your kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews that's about that age begging for some comfort. And nope, Jimmy's gone. And I wasn't to talk about him anymore. I have two pictures that are precious to me. And I gave my teddy bear to my oldest son. And I'll talk about a little bit about that later. This was real. Uh, what this organization does to children is unacceptable. It's horrible to live waiting on this war. All these people getting killed. Oh, but I'm going to be okay because, well, I'm chosen. I didn't like that. I mean, I loved my mother's family. They were some of the best people you could ever meet. None of them witnesses. And I had to think they're going to be killed. And it was always from my father, well, you have to preach unless they become witnesses. Yeah. It just said so nonchalant, emotionless, if you will. Um, and as I aged, I thought arrogant too. Um, I didn't like that. I wanted to be a regular kid and not have this pressure. So again, I'm born in 53. In 58, the Paradise Book comes out, which does talk about the end and the end of the old system, they called it, and then the
Right.
new order coming in.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Nowadays, at Jehovah's Witnesses funerals, they usually talk about the person maybe 3, 4 minutes, and then the rest of the time is spent talking about soliciting for Jehovah's Witnesses. Right?
Right.
They very seldom go deeply into the person's life, what they
Right.
like to eat, what they enjoy
Sure.
doing. So back in those days, around the time when Jimmy died, somewhere around 53 or what have you, or whatever year it
Hmm.
um, was the funerals for Jehovah's Witnesses different? Did they focus more on the person, or was it a campaign for Jehovah's Witnesses?
It's the latter. Um, it's definitely the latter. Um, my father um, would preach any funeral he could. He was a barber, so you get to know clients and stuff, and um, they didn't have a church or someone, and he would often drag me along to sit in the back of the funeral home while he preached. I could have given that talk. It's the same one. My father died about 12 years ago, and my mother 10 years ago, and to the end, they didn't think they would ever die. They were going to slide into paradise. Um, and I so they had the witness funeral, that the same words that I heard 50, 60 years ago. The same thing. But I'm pretty outspoken, and I said, I'm going to speak at the funeral. And I wasn't challenged when I said I was going to do it, and I did it. Didn't like my father, as anyone can tell when they read the book, but I did believe in respect. And because I worked in healthcare, not as a caregiver, but in the administrative side, um, I was very important to them in their late life to help them get the best health care. I took them to specialists and hospitals in Columbus and Cleveland Clinic, and whatever I could do to help them. Then that was okay. My father had told me, because it's been 40 years I've been out, but he had said, if I'm around the family, which is going to be rare, never, ever, ever say anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, because he didn't want me to turn anyone away. This is, later, but yeah, the funerals were the same. It's just to recruit. So I got up and I just spoke about, taking a walk with him on the railroad tracks when I was young. And that just a few days before his death, he and I took a little walk together. I kept it very neutral. People didn't know what to expect. I never said one word about witnesses or their beliefs. Um, it was just a few words about him. And then 2 years after, my mother died. Now, in my book, I um, I have in there what I said at her funeral, because she was a dynamic, amazing woman. I begged her to leave that so many times, and to stop being a witness. But she would say, this was what she chose, and she had 5 kids, and the longer you're in a congregation and you have your little friends that you gossip with and go door to door, um, she never left it. And I could have a conversation. I could talk about the beliefs that couldn't possibly be true. And of course, we'll get to 1975, which was one of them. Um, and she would listen, and we both respected and loved each other. And I'm so thankful that we had some time together. But yeah, I spoke at their funerals, and particularly with Mom, projected photos of her um, during the funeral, because it was back then. It's the same thing. Witnesses are just about recruiting. How many more members can they count? Um, and it's greed. To me, it's total greed. I guess churches tithe, which is 10%. 10% would have never been enough. They wanted everything from people. They wanted their homes signed over to them and any life insurance policies. I mean, I babysat for probably a quarter an hour, or maybe it was a quarter for the evening back then, but I think it was a quarter an hour. And Dad was always on me. You have to put some of that in the contribution box, and we were poor. And he would watch. He just would watch everything, and I didn't until really recently came up with the notion, Belle. I guess I was an apostate as a child. And
Wow.
I kind of say that with pride, I guess, because logic and common sense and reason about things, um, there were so many things that just didn't add up. When you go back and look at their beliefs, I mean, there was a time, I think it was a couple years before I was born, they celebrated birthdays.
Oh, wow.
And I believe it was at Bethel or at the society or wherever that they probably didn't want to spend any more money on it, but they nixed birthdays. The same can be true about the blood issue and transplants. I mean, those things have changed over the years, and it's heartbreaking how many people have lost their lives
Wow.
because of trying to follow these beliefs that they think Jehovah wants them to do.
Yeah. When I served at Bethel, I saw pictures that earlier on, maybe before the 30s, they celebrated Christmas at Bethel,
Hmm.
and I actually saw some of those pictures, so I
And,
can only imagine what you're saying.
and they
Um,
even back then wore crosses, which
oh
oh,
yeah,
oh, that's pagan, yeah.
yeah, they had a Jesus piece, right?
Hmm.
So, as the because a lot of Jehovah Witnesses nowadays they tend to try to scoff at the idea of 1975, or they say, well, maybe some of the friends in the organization thought it was 1975, but it really never came from the organization. Blase. Could you help us to understand the climate and walk
I
us
will,
through that?
I will. I think I was 11 or 12 when I was finally baptized. So we're into the 60s now.
Okay,
And I did some research just because I want to give you some facts. So I'll look at my
thank
notes
you.
here. So in 1966, I began that year. I'm probably 12 years old. And the Watchtower, the May 15th Watchtower in 1966. And my father made us read every magazine, every article. We were grilled at dinner. He put up a list to how many pages or things we had to read in the Bible to be able to read the Bible every year, all the way through.
Wow,
Even though, anyway, I won't go into that. So, yes, May 15th, 1966. They said 1975 is the beginning of Christ's millennial reign and the end of the world. So I'm looking at, about 9 years from now, Armageddon and then paradise. And it was real. That same year, there was a book that came out from the society called In Freedom of the Sons of God. And they went into detail about this belief that man was created in the year 4026. And because each year is supposed to be 6,000 years, from creation, they had that in Genesis. So you take 6,000 years minus 4,026, and it brings you to 1975. And so I, I was, this was, everybody talked about it. And there was not supposed to be really discouraged to be going to college, any secondary education, you know, pretty much just get by and spend every minute you can preaching. And I didn't really like to do that. But so another magazine I looked up was from 1968. So by now, I started that year about 14. Well, it would have been 14, May 1st, 1968. Um, it's a watchtower, and it's talking about how the old system is almost here, and it would just be a few years. So they wanted everybody to pioneer. And I remember, we're supposed to be believing that God's going to protect us somehow. I don't know how he's going to, you'd see the pictures. Was it fiery rain coming down, or I don't know,
right.
how is he going to kill everybody? But there were some witnesses in the congregation that had farms, and they actually built like underground shelters and like
Wow,
preppers saved food. That's where they were going to go when whatever happened with this Armageddon. And of course, back in those years, around the after the wars and all, there was a lot of fear about bombs or killing or things going on. Also in 1968 is when the Truth Book came out, the little Truth Book, Truth that Leads to Eternal Life. And it in there is talking about this time of the end. The following year, in 1969, and now I'm about 15 years old, the May 15th Watchtower talked about, due to the short time left, if you're
wow,
studying with anyone, don't study more than 6 months. If they haven't converted by then, it's like kick them to the curb, go to the next one. Um, if I could interject for just a second, been, I was invited to a book club at a local library, and the group had read my book. Um, and a woman there said that she's probably my age, 60s, I would think. She was the first there and one of the last to leave because she wanted to talk to me. And she said that there was a witness couple that had studied with her for like 10 or 15 years. And that her husband died, and the wife came to see her. And she said she thought the wife was there to comfort her, and because of her husband's death. And she said, this couple had had a baby girl, and she'd gotten to know this little girl. She thought these people truly, genuinely cared about her. And she said, the wife came and said, we won't be coming back. Your husband's dead. He never got baptized. You guys didn't really come to the Kingdom Hall, so we're done. And that was that. And she said, she asked me, is that real? I said, oh yeah. Their whole deal is that we're supposed to spend every penny and every second of our time converting people. And if y'all don't get in here so you can be counted as a member, then yeah, they do that. And, then, but after 1975 passed, then obviously you could spend years converting, and you got to count those hours. So once you had some Bible study people, then you got to do that. But it was heartbreaking. I could see the pain in her because she said, I loved them. I thought they loved us. And it's, so these people were never baptized, but they were kind of disfellowshipped, disassociated. They were just, you throw them to the side like they're dead. And I was just so sad for her because I know how that feels. So anyway, back to 69. When, I was saying they weren't supposed to study with anybody at more than 6 months. And of course, we were told, don't go to college, don't have kids, don't get married. Some people sold homes and businesses. Some people, this is 69. We think we got about 6 years till paradise. So, if you had some health issues, you needed surgery or you needed something, if you can delay it, just wait, because we're going to slide into paradise. And hey, we're going to be perfectly healthy. I mean, isn't that great? It was real. 1975 was real. I didn't want to be a pioneer. I didn't even really want to be a witness, but I also didn't want to lose my family. And I did marry in 1971 at the age of 18. I was 18 and one day. My husband was 18 and 6 months old. I was just a young girl. I didn't know what I was doing. But back then, they would get the young teens together in maybe a skating party or a square dance or something, so we could meet each other from congregations. And there weren't many. I mean, to get 20 boys and girls together to try to fix them up to marry, that's what they did. And we were really encouraged to do that if we weren't going to pioneer or be a missionary. And that was a very tough time in my life. I'll skip over a little bit here just to say that, to stay with the 1975, Mel. So Fred, in the spring of 1975, the vice president of the society, Fred Franz, said that he was looking confidently at the autumn of 1975. Because, New Year's, we're all up New Year's Eve. Does it happen January 1st, 1975? Nope. January 2nd. I mean, we're just waiting for this to happen. And so he says, well, it's going to be the autumn of the year. And at some point, someone said late September. And my birthday's September 3rd. So, I would have been 22 then maybe. But in 1975, on the May 1st magazine, Watchtower, they gave this reason that, well, they couldn't get an exact date and time because, well, yeah, that's when Adam was born, but then, or created, but then we're not real sure about Eve. I mean, they hedged on so many things. And, some just said, well, Jehovah decided we're going to give people a little more time.
Mm.
Instead of just bringing the end right now, let's give a little more time. So get out there, pioneer, preach, do that. And then July 15th, Watchtower of 1976, the following year, um, they started saying, well, don't set your sights on a date, and that they didn't fail. But as members, we got it wrong. I mean, if there was, I didn't want to be a witness, but all these things, then I thought, wait a minute, because I always thought my dad as a young child had a hotline to Jehovah. I mean, we were taught that the society, those men there spoke to Jehovah. Everything that was happening, all this literature, all these beliefs, everything came from Jehovah. Um, I can remember back then, it seemed like at the White House, there was like a red phone. There was this emergency phone. And I can remember thinking, it's like, do they use a phone? How does he talk to him? I don't know. But that even my dad was Jehovah's friend, and that what they were telling us was from Jehovah was true. Um, that's like, that's how, like, my father's extreme, but so was our congregations that I grew up in. In 1977, at a Toronto assembly, President Fred Franz pointed out to the audience, because everybody's asking, okay, it's been 2 years. Um, what happened? And he pointed to all the people at the assembly saying, it's your fault for expecting something to happen. And the society took absolute no responsibility for that. Um, I was waiting to have children. I love children. One of the impetus for my book is for us to talk about children. And so 1977, May 2nd, my first son was born. I waited, although anxious. Armageddon, maybe it could happen in 77 or 80. They weren't really predicting then. As you move forward in time, in 1979, the nephew of Fred Franz, or the nephew of, I'm sorry, the president, Ray Franz, was Fred Franz. And he said, and he wrote the book, Crisis of Conscience. I'm sure a lot of people know that. And he said that, we were all supposed to believe that these beliefs came from Jehovah to the governing body, to them. And he realized that as he sat in meetings there and they discussed these beliefs, that there were brothers from other parts of the world who had done research. And there was a lot of argument about these dates and where do they go next. And he said he realized that it wasn't Jehovah guiding them. It was a show of hands that made decisions and interpretations. It was corporate manipulation. Now, I think as we know that he wrote this book to explain. He didn't really want to stop being a witness, but he did become disfellowshipped. And he said he only had $600 when the society, kicked him to the curb to make his way, and that fortunately there were some members that helped out. After about this time, around 1979, the latest thing the society came out with was that if you were a believer in 1914, that you would still be alive to see the end of Armageddon. So this kind of kicked that date down the road a little bit. The way I thought of it, and at one point they even said, so it wasn't if you were born in 1914. At one point they said, if you're 30 years old in 1914, you would live to see the end. So, quick dirty math here. If I'm 30 in 1914, and let's just say I lived to be 100, that would have been 1914 plus 70 would be 1984. But again, so they're kicking it down, not that far off of that 1975 date. This is all documentable information. Um, it was in 1980 that Ray Franz was disfellowshipped and he published his book. In So anytime I hear anybody saying, "Well, 1975," no, it was real. It was what we lived with. It's what we waited for, constantly is this end. And it's heartbreaking to me to know there are still so many people living that way, kind of holding off from really enjoying life and being free, and children not living in fear. There are still being told these things that the end is near. It's soon. It's soon. And so it was actually in 1982 that I finally just kind of, I guess, didn't know the term then, but I guess I faded away. I would add when I was 16 years old, I had a boyfriend, a non-witness, and we had sex a few times, but I thought it was hidden. When I was married at 18, a few months later, supposedly, and I think the more I think about it, I thought, this is a lie. Knocking on doors, someone told that they went to school with me and that he saw us having sex. And so I was approached by the elders, and I was disfellowshipped. And these elders had just been at my wedding a few months prior. And I think one of the big things I was disfellowshipped for, well, I think there were two things. One was they didn't believe that my husband and I didn't have sex before marriage, but we didn't. When I was with the Catholic boy, it was, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 times that I was like an out-of-body experience. I knew this was wrong, but I wanted to get out of my father's home. I didn't. I don't know. I was just a stupid 16-year-old. If I would be willing to say that. But they wouldn't believe that I wasn't going to do anything. I loved my first husband, and I'd repented, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be all right. But I really think something else happened. I won't say who I think told them, somebody I went to school with, but that's a witness. But also, all the way back then, my father, I think he saw apostasy in me, if you will, because I was always questioning and I was always getting punished and being forced to read the scripture, stand up in front of him. He would lecture to me, and I would have to go through the Bible and read scriptures and at least pretend to be convinced, because otherwise it would never end. But yeah, so we in 1982, my husband left. We were married 10 years, almost 11. And the elders kept coming to me and wanted to know what he did, telling me, well, you can't get remarried unless it's grounds for divorce. Unless you tell us he committed adultery, then maybe you can get remarried. But you got to tell us what he did. And they kept hammering at me, and I kept saying, you need to go to him and let him tell you. And my father was very harsh on me. He felt, what have you done? You go get your husband. You haven't been a good wife. I got zero support. And as far as I know, the elders never talked to my husband. I really don't believe they did. And we were even in an even smaller congregation at that time. And these people aren't very bright. I'm sorry, but they just weren't. And um, so after the dissolution, um, I knew I didn't want my children raised this way. And so I stopped going. I wasn't ever officially disfellowshipped or disassociated, but I just kind of faded away and I didn't want anything to do with it. Um, my father knew, though, that I didn't believe and continued to threaten me to never speak about anything to turn anyone from it, especially family members. Um, and so I went from, I pretty much lost everything. Um, your congregation, there were people there I liked. There were some people there that shouldn't, that were horrible. There was a man there that beat his wife, would come with black eyes. His kids were terrified of him. He had
Really?
2 boys and a girl. And he was a horrible man. Um, I wouldn't let him hold my kids or come near him. And nothing was done. He was always in good standing. And I found out years after I left that he was molesting his granddaughters and
Oh my.
went to court. And do you know who stood behind him in court about what a great man he was?
Who?
The elders, the
Wow.
elders in the congregation. And I don't know all the detail, but yeah, he was still in good standing. So I don't know if they probably went by the 2 witness rule, that even though these girls did go, the parents did go to the authorities, the government, the police. Uh, they the elders stood behind this man. I hated. I mean, I hated it, and I felt so bad for his children. For as bad as my father was, and he did beat us, because you know how awful it is. I have an adorable 6-year-old grandson, and he's full of energy. I just love him to death. And when he spends a day with me, I need a week to recover. But you think about a child, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3, 4, 5, 6, any age, sitting through 2 hours on Thursday night from 7 to 9 and not making a sound or a commotion of anything. Was a commotion, anything that disrupted. And it's there, there's churches at least have a little room for usually babies, and then a little room for children to color pictures of Jesus or whatever. But as children, I mean, back then, Tuesday nights, Bible study at a neighbor's, a witness home. Thursday night, 7 to 9, 2 hours of sitting through the most boring. But then as we got older, we better have studied the lessons, and we better have put our hand up all the time. Put my hand up thinking, please don't call on me. But Dad would watch us, and if we didn't put our hand up or answer, there would be hell to pay. We had a relative in the congregation, and I don't want to say too much, but I would say, why does he get to come into our home? Because he would always rub himself against me and be
Oh
very
my.
suggestive, and I would be uncomfortable, and it was always my fault. And I was a little. This is when I was little. I might have been 9 or 10, or whenever you get start to get a little bud. I mean, he was disgusting, and um, again, he was always in good standing. He never became an elder, and he had actually gone to prison as a he's a conscientious objector. So this had been way back then. Um, but I loathed this man, and it was not only did I have to see him at the Kingdom Hall, he was in our home. Um, Never understood that. Um, I pretty much 40 years ago. I'm 28 years old. I'm 68. For 40 years, I haven't given this organization much thought. I shouldn't say that's probably not true. I had to find deprogramming. I moved away to Columbus, big city, got a good job, put my two sons into school, um, looked for a psychologist almost immediately. And after trying a couple, found a wonderful lady that I talk about in my book, my first Dr. Laura. And I didn't know the word deprogramming. I just knew my mind. I was sharp at work. There were things I did well. But how do you stop that in your mind that tomorrow or today there's a flood? Uh, Tomorrow there's a war. The next day there's famine. There's everything happening. Every bad thing happening is, oh well, that's Armageddon. That's coming. That's coming. That's coming. I didn't want to live. I didn't believe it, but it was hard to turn that off. And so she worked with me for a year. I'd go once a week. And, I'm a single mom raising two kids. I didn't have a lot of money, but I knew I needed this to be happy. And I also got psychologists for my sons because they'd been through a dissolution. We moved away from family. They adored my mother and their other grandmother. But I knew I needed to get them away from the environment. And I don't know that we wanted to talk about it here, but after, if they visited my parents, my father would tell them that I was a horrible mother, that they were going to die because I didn't take them to the Kingdom Hall. And when I found this out, I said, that's it. They'll never come back. And of course, my mom's devastated. I said, do not ever speak this way to my sons again. And we're celebrating Christmas now and having a great time and birthdays. And we're really happy now. And Dad finds out and tells him, well, that's pagan and all this negativity. But he would tell my sons, don't tell your mom. And that's a really dirty thing to do. I mean, my sons were, by the time the dissolution, they were 2 and 5. When I moved to Columbus, they were about 8 and 10. They were children. He shouldn't have been telling them this about their mother. And so if he told them things, he would say, don't tell your mom. And it really, really hurt my oldest son. He was really conflicted. And he's had a lot of problems with some of this. But yeah, it's a horrible what's done to children. It's like, don't you people even think? I mean, isn't it the job of a parent to keep their child safe and to give them a good life? And so it breaks my heart, Mel, as after my book came out, my second son got on Facebook sites. I mean, he's got a business. He knows how to market. He joined Facebook sites. Now, he was 2 years old so he never was witness. But he certainly had heard about stuff during his growing up years. But he got on the ex or former JW sites to tell people about my book. He's very proud of me that I survived. I had a lot of other roller coaster rides for the rest of my years, but he was very proud of it. And so I thought, well, maybe I should get on there. And Mel, when I left, there was no support groups. I had no one. My psychologist, I did. But to have community, I didn't have that. The night I was disfellowshipped, my father told my mother and the other 4 siblings, never speak Kathy's name again. I mean, so
Wow.
for a year, I was dead, but you had to go to the meetings. And I went to the fewest I could go to. It was so painful to sit in the Kingdom Hall. I'm 18 years old. I just had a wedding. I babysat all these kids. I love children. There were 2 families that each had 4 children, and I was the favorite babysitter. And these children that I sat with from birth till now a few years old, had to walk past me and had been told, don't look at her, don't touch her. Like that yeah, I thought about not wanting to be alive anymore.
Wow.
I thought, had it not been for my husband who forgave me and stuck by me, and his father was never a witness, he welcomed me into their home because he wasn't a witness. He was the head of the family. My husband's mother was a witness, but she went along with her. Her husband said, "We're having Kathy. We're going to have him come over," and um, that was a saving grace for me. The other one really was because I was working, and I was blessed to get to work in healthcare around some really really good people. Um, didn't talk a lot about religion or my life or things with them, but just to be in a new environment and see how people talk and interact with each other. And, it's like I was in a new country, learning a new language back then. And that's helped me so much. I just can't even explain that.
Wow, that's amazing. After the upset for 1975 and the end didn't show up, did you notice or did you hear if a lot of Jehovah Witnesses stopped or fell off?
There were, I didn't hear a lot, did. There had been this huge growth, I think, after that assembly in 63 and all this things going on back then. I think there became a lot of growth and it became more international. Um, but it seemed like the society knew how to um, manipulate people. Well, we don't know the date, but yeah, well, they try to talk about that year was, even Bible scholars can't, believe that date. And there was a book published about famine back then, that in 1975 we were going to have this world famine. And so any bits of information that added the weight to that date, they would throw out there. And then when that passed, it was, well, be thankful Jehovah's giving us a few more years and a few more years. So, 75 to 82 is what, 5 years? So I was hanging around briefly. This new PIMO, that's all new to me. When I got on the groups, I'm like, what is this? Um, I guess you could say I was kind of physically in, but I had been mentally out for many of those years. I don't remember in the congregations I was in that there was. I think people just were sheep. They just went along with whatever they were being told.
Right. Wow. What helped you? Um, I often say, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but I often say that I think one of the worst positions to be in as an ex Jehovah Witness or a former Jehovah Witness is to be a person that left because you sinned as a teenager, like some
Hmm.
of the celebrities that we see.
Yes.
So they left at a young age and they spend the rest of their lives feeling like it's the truth and they need to go back. They didn't get a chance to wake up and see that this is something's not right. And so every time a big upset happened in the world, they run back to the religion.
Hmm.
So what helped you throughout the last 40 years to hold a steady hand?
Um, I knew I knew it wasn't the truth. Um, I was in a very small, poor community in southeastern Ohio. I didn't have resources in the beginning, but about 5 years after, I pretty much faded. Yeah, it was hard to leave because this had been my whole life, and I wasn't. My father was watched everything, and I wasn't going to meetings. I wasn't knocking on doors. Um, he knew I doubted, but I'd never, after a certain point, I just gave up having any conversation. I don't know. I asked my psychologist, because I'm one of five siblings, why me? Why was I so determined that I can't believe this? That this isn't right. Um, on the back of my book, I say, "What do you do when the truth changes? what do you do when you think you're going to be friends again with little boy in paradise, and then paradise doesn't happen, and then this changes, and that changes, and there were suicides of people, especially when you're disfellowshipped. And it's so wrong, because even as a 16-year-old that did something, and right or wrong, a lot of kids did, that's not that's not right to turn against a child. Even as an 18-year-old bride, I was a young girl, and just trying to figure out what to do. And if anything, I guess what you made me think of, Mel, is I was not going to do this to my kids. No matter what it took, my sons were not going to be witnesses. Um, on one of the former JW sites within the last couple of weeks, someone asked, what made your decision to leave? And a young mother said, she's sitting in a meeting with her baby. We love our babies. And a mom got up and took her, like a 2 or 3 year old, to the back and spanked her. I mean, God, I was that 2 or 3 year old, and 4 and 5. I mean, and she said, this kid's wailing and crying. And she said she just got up and left. I
Wow,
get that. I
that's
absolutely
amazing.
get that. Our parents were expected to keep us quiet and sit there for those hours, and we're tired. And, if you fell asleep and fell out of the chair, you were going to get beat when you got home if you didn't get beat there. Uh, Sometimes, mom wasn't as harsh as dad, but I do remember, Mel, that as a child, 5 of us, there were times he lined us up in the kitchen when we got home and would just beat each one of us for
Wow.
for whatever. Now, there's a 12-year difference between me and my youngest brother, so I think, I don't think we all got hit the same, um, but I wasn't going to let my kids be in that. No matter what it took, and it was hard. Um, and I had to make a new life for myself, away from them. I described it as, I think maybe it's what you feel like if you graduated high school and went to college and you're on your own. I mean, when I moved, I felt like I'm on my own. I'm uh, I'm free. I can. It was that year when I moved to Columbus. It was in 1987. It was 5 years after the divorce. My kids are about 8 and 10. We had our first Christmas tree. And I remember one of my brothers came to visit, walked up on the porch, saw the tree, and turned around and walked back. Um, and that's the end of our relationship. Um, During my parents' illness, we could have conversation about their illness. We could talk about the funeral. And as soon as the funeral ended, I haven't heard from I have one brother and one sister still in, haven't spoken to them in 10 and 12 years. Um, my Another interesting thing was, as girls, we were pushed to be baptized. And we don't know when we're 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. Um, we don't know what we're going to do with our life. I mean, we've got so much growing up to do. I mean, they say now there's brain studies that our brains still trying to develop into our 20s. But, Mel, my brothers were never forced to be baptized. And I don't want to tell a story about one of them, but suffice to say, they were allowed to put some things off that I believe, let's just say, protected them from being disfellowshipped. But then again, even if they did things wrong, if it was a man or male boy, um, they kind of got the wrist slap versus um, what I believe women got. Um, and one of the things we haven't really talked about is just how, not just how badly children are treated, but how badly women are treated, disrespected, and certainly not considered an equal. Um, I can remember a talk way back then that said, the husband is the head of the marriage, but the wife's the heart. Well, we just have heart, we love, but we can't really think. We're not really very smart, I guess. The demeaning way that we were treated, condescending. Um, I didn't like that. So I guess besides my son leaving because my sons were not going to be witnesses, I was a woman, and there was a lot of movements going on back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and sense of equality for women, and you know, can bring home the bacon and cook it and do all those things the song said. Um, so I guess I don't know. That's my answer if that makes sense.
All right, very good. So I have another question for you. We know Coca-Cola sells soda. Um, we know other companies sell their products. How come Jehovah Witnesses are able to sell the end of the world for so long and people not get the point? Like, how long can you say the end of the world is coming?
I don't
You've
It's
looked at it
astounding to
over a
me.
lifetime.
It's astounding. Um, yeah, I thought the end was coming in 75. I truly, truly did. And now here we are. And my sons are in their 40s. I don't get it. People wake up. Thought for sure I could convince my mom to get free. You know, look at all this stuff. I don't. I think sometimes people are just lazy, and somebody knocks on their door. Hey, how would you like to live in paradise and be healthy, and the world would be at peace? And they mislead you. They sucker you in. I guess one of the new terms is they love bomb you. Um, which they do. Oh, a new person at the Kingdom Hall. Nobody knows they're a pedophile, but oh yeah, we love them. Um, I don't know why people are staying. I keep hoping. I got a few years left here that I'll see the fall of that organization, and with what's happened with in Australia and Norway, with recent events now that I've gotten more involved, that I see, the child sex abuse and um, the shunning, which is it's a crime hate. I mean, shunning is it's worse than if you're in prison and you're in solitary confinement because at least you're alone. If you're being shunned but you're trying to get back to your family, you got people just pretending you don't even exist, that you're dead. Um, how it's almost like, but then if someone was disfellowship, I was supposed to shun them. There are things that just in my very soul never felt right um, at all. Um,
Do you think it's possible that, in comparison to your siblings, that you were more of a critical thinker?
Absolutely. I asked my psychologist. She said, "Kathy, you're smart." I'm like, "Well, okay." I mean, I am a girl.
You are.
No, I had a high IQ. I critically thought. Um, I was it was in my 50s when I finally finished a bachelor's degree, and um, I took a
Good for you.
psychology class, and it's the first I really heard the term cognitive dissonance. And I was fascinated, and I had great conversation with the instructor about that. And so I think people start, you said, why do they stay? I think people start believing something, even though the facts, the real facts, you can prove to them it's what their beliefs are wrong. They just kind of hold on to it. Well, that's what I'm used to. That's where my friends and family and community are, and I'll just go along with it. And well, yeah, everybody makes a mistake, but um, I don't know, because to me, everybody ought to be getting out and running for the hills from this organization. I hope there are enough lawsuits to bring them down. But there has that's a corporation. That's more than 8 governing body members. I just believe there has to be. Um, there's so much money behind everything. I mean, um, and it's interesting that they still want people to sign over their house to them when they die, or their life insurance to the society. Why do they need all this money if the end is coming? What's going on? You've spoke some about what's going on there in New York with the new headquarters and new places in other parts of the world. And um, where are they getting all this money, and why do they need more money? But it's never enough. I mean, I heard that Canada lists Jehovah's Witnesses as a charity, boy, if there's any organization that's not a charity, it's Witnesses. Never once was there a an event that we went in, a flood or whatever the problem was, and you helped, they could help the community. No, the members went and did things. Um, way back when we raised, we put in the contributions and the skills to build kingdom halls. Um, and, we gave and we gave and we gave. It wasn't the society. Uh, you never heard about them going into for a food drive or a clothing drive or anything. Someone was ill. The other members had to help. They weren't coming forward with anything, but they just take and they take and they take, and people keep giving. And at some point, I just don't understand why people don't wake up. I so much as I've gotten more involved in the last few months want to call my brother that's still in so badly. But I can say the brief interactions I had with him at the funerals, I just feel like now I'd be hitting my head against the wall, and I don't want to do that anymore.
All right. So, first, I want to say that a lot of people here are from different parts of the world. We have some people here
Mhm.
from Germany,
Oh,
Australia. So, you're getting a lot of support, and international support is really beautiful.
thank
For
you.
those that have just come in, I just want you to encourage you to purchase her book, Where's Jimmy? And we're going to talk about Jimmy a little more before we end this live stream. But Kathy Jefford is the author, and we appreciate her so much. She's always contributing to the station or to this channel, and I really appreciate your participation. Even when other people did not speak up, she chose to come on, and she even submitted a video, which I'm going to be posting after this particular live. I noticed that there's a lot of women on this live stream, very interested in your life. So, could you say something empowering for the women on the stream? What would you tell uh, the the sisters that had the courage to leave the organization and lost their support group?
You have to find help. You have to find it. And like I say, for me, it was a psychologist. And what I'm learning is there are so many former JWs that have become counselors, that have become, that do work to help you survive that. These are gifts, and beg people, don't think you don't need that. You do need that. You need help to understand brainwashing and to clear your mind and go get help. Um, Believe in yourself. I mean, that's the thing. We've been put down so much um, that they need help. Join these groups. I wish we had. I haven't seen a local group, and I didn't think I'd ever want to go to one, but I think I would if I had some kindness to spread there. Um, yeah, it's hard to say goodbye to people, and it's my younger sister. She kind of fade. She's been fading for probably 15 years because of incidents that happened in the family, and it's really been in the last 3 or 4 years that since I retired and wrote this book and would call her and discuss it. It's really been the last 3 or 4 years that we've gotten closer, and I cherish that. Um, but I know she's not had the kind of counseling that I'd love for her to have, because it's hard when when the Ukraine war started. Is this the king of the north or the south, or who knows? Is this a sign? I mean, that is so in there that um, I said no. I sort of no. It is not. I promise. There's no going to be no Armageddon. Um, One of my blessings too. The other thing besides study and search, when I was getting my college degree, um, as an adult, working adult, I went to a uh, Ohio Dominican University, a Catholic school, and it was mandatory to take religion classes. Well, if I wasn't working on a business degree, and I'd already done business for 30, 40 years, um, I loved the religion classes. I loved what we learned about Bibles. And these stories, those aren't true, those are just stories. Um, whatever bits of knowledge that you come across on your own or with others, really let those marinate. Um, that was, I loved what I learned, just as I did with the psychology and learning, cognitive dissonance. I'm like, aha. There's just, I think we all have aha moments, just like the young mom that heard the kid getting a beating. Okay, that's enough. I'm done. I'm done. And I just would encourage women, everyone, to get out of this and don't. When I see people posting things that they're divorced and the father or the mother is trying to get the child to be a witness and the other one doesn't want him to be, and they're going back and forth. Um, and with what my father did to my children, the things he said to them, wow, people, keep your children as far from this organization as you can.
Really appreciate that. In connection with the book, Where's Jimmy? What was the biggest motivating factor for you writing the book, and what is the overall message that you have for everyone as to why you want them to purchase it?
I um, so I knew I didn't believe what the witnesses taught. I didn't believe this. Jimmy's not going to be in paradise. I attended some Christian churches, and I liked their belief, but couldn't really. And I attended a few Sunday services. I sent my kids to their church camps in the summer, so they had some knowledge. Um, so where is Jimmy in his afterlife? And that's just noodled me as much as anything. And so um, for years, especially since 52, so for 15 years, whatever, since those classes, I've looked at religions closer. I visited a Buddhist temple. I've been to Native American services. Um, um, there was a guy I worked with who was from India. So Hindu, I studied religion. And what do they say about Jimmy? And the last chapter is I found Jimmy. Besides finding um, what I believe is an afterlife, and I don't say a whole lot about what I believe, except that this spark of life that comes within us when we start breathing as a child or a baby, this spark, this energy, this individualness. I mean, that's the thing with witnesses. They don't want you to be an individual. Um, Jimmy he was a sweet little boy, and I saw him in a lot of pain. And whatever goodness there is when we leave, he's still there. Um, so I put in there, what different churches teach, and it's really up to each individual what they want to believe. And universalists are kind of, well, when we're dead, we're dead. And for a long time, I thought, okay, I guess he's dead, except he's still in my mind. Um, and as much as I've spent a lot of time in funerals and cemeteries, it took me a long time to find his grave. And I won't go into all that, but even just finally, just a few years ago, finding his grave, this little small tombstone with a little lamb on it, that said our son. Uh, his life mattered.
Yes, indeed. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your story. It's so powerful in the book. I really enjoy reading it, and it really touched me because one of the things we discussed before we started this line is that Jehovah's Witnesses teach or taught that Jimmy's life and resurrection is based on his parents continuing to be Jehovah's Witnesses. How
Absolutely.
cruel and unusual is that teaching? So it's almost as if Jimmy gets trapped, gets blocked out because his
Hmm.
parents chose to move on to a different religion and no longer believed in Jehovah's Witnesses. That is,
That's
it's
exactly it.
really sad.
Very
Um,
sad.
yeah. So I'd like to ask everybody in the audience to please put a heart in the comment section for Jimmy, in memory of Jimmy. And I'd like to encourage you guys to purchase the book. I'm going to post the link um, on the community wall for Watching the World after this live stream is over. So we really
Thank you, Mel.
appreciate you coming on. This is very touching, and I can really relate to what you went through and leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses during a time when you didn't have the vast support groups that we have today. When I woke up from Jehovah's Witnesses, I was at Bethel, and I didn't know anything about all of these Jehovah Witness, former Jehovah Witness groups. It was just me standing on my own 2 feet, but I realized, just like you, that something was dramatically wrong. So I take my hat off to you because you have empowered me, and I know you've empowered all the women and men on this live stream here tonight, and we really do appreciate you, and we really support you. I know it's tough, and I can tell that by the way you express yourself, that Jimmy's thoughts is just like it was yesterday that these things happen, and you'll be forever touched by Jimmy. And I will too, because the way you laid out this book is phenomenal. And I think that you're going to make a new wave in the ex or the former Jehovah Witness community, because we have people like yourself writing books, taking your time, your valuable time, to present a message that's going to affect people forever. We have other people like Natalie that came out with a comic book. These are new things happening, exciting things happening to help people stay away from an organization that has damaged so many people. And we thank you. We thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and we look forward to your next work. I can just see that more is definitely going to come from you, and I'm excited, and I'm so excited to have my copy of the book.
Thank you, Mel.
It means the world to me. And thank you to everyone that came out tonight. Please follow Kathy. She's pretty new to social media, but we're going to make it very clear for you to follow her work, and we will definitely be having her back on Watching the World. I think this has been the best live stream yet, and it's all because of you. So thank you to everyone. In conclusion, Kathy, I'd just like for you to end out this live stream with a message to all of your new found friends in the comment section.
Well, I love having new friends. I love every time one of the groups says we have two new members or 24 new members, because to me, we're all new friends now. And we all have felt the same things. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have these groups. And I got Natalie Grand's book called Girls when it first came out, and we communicate almost daily. And I think what she's done is remarkable, and it's going to help, especially younger, I think maybe teenagers and 20-year-olds, or really it could help everyone. Um, and I'm just so proud of her. She could be my daughter with her age, but uh, yeah, there's so many good resources.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'd like to just say one thing to all of you who are watching, especially from all over the world. Um, please follow in Kathy's fine example. Each of you have a story, so make sure you tell it. It might be
Yes,
difficult to write a book. I'm pretty sure Kathy would be more than happy to share
I would.
the various steps, and also Natalie as well. She's always helping people write books, or maybe it's making videos, but whatever you do, just do something because these cults throughout the world are very dangerous,
There.
and it's all about helping the next generation avoid the mistakes that we made in life. So thank you for tuning in to the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please go out and make sure you look out for the link to buy the book, Where's Jimmy? That's going to be posted on the wall. Show support to Kathy. She did a beautiful job tonight. We love her. And good night to all. And we'll see you soon next week on Watching the World. And have a good night. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.